from Andrew. He says, I know I speak for many when I say that it was Charles who got me interested in learning more about the Habsburg dynasty. And turned me into a Habsburg supporter. Many who watch this show favor a Habsburg restoration. But my question is, do the Habsburgs favor Habsburg restoration? I ask this because I read not long ago an interview with one of the Habsburgs in the line of succession, and he did not seem very interested at all in reclaiming his birthright as king of Austria, Hungary, Bohemia, Jerusalem, etc., etc. As someone who has met many members of the Habsburg family, how do they view themselves in relation to the world? Are they interested in regaining their authority? Would they take the crown if offered to them? Are they interested in remaining as a kind of symbol for tradition? Or is it something else?
Well, mind you, I can't really speak for them because I am in no way any kind of a spokesman for any of the Habsburgs. Um, but I would say that they're number one. I would say that they all believe that the dynasty represents certain values, religious and political, and in a certain sense must act as witnesses to those particular values. Now, of course, the problem with those values is that they are rejected by everybody running the show in the world today, and probably the vast majority of people. Most people like the slop they have to a greater or lesser degree. And of course, before the Habsburgs, is always the example of what happened to Blessed Emperor Karl, who was utterly shredded. Um, so it's very, very difficult. The Do you put yourself up as a leader in order to get shot down by a very ungrateful bunch of people anyway, who have what they want, who are eating the sewage that they so crave so badly? Why would you want to pull people away from the sewage they're eating? I mean, it's one thing to demand that one of them play Aragorn, but even Aragorn had rangers. I mean, there's a lot of pro-Habsburg sentiment, but sentiment is not the same thing as a commitment to a cause. And the vast majority, I mean, mutatis mutandis, it's like with the pro-life cause. You know, here uh, when we finally get the opportunity in America with Roe v. Wade being knocked down, and the true nature of things is seen. The majority of people in America, and I'm sure it's true in Europe, want abortion. Who would want to rule such people? Now, I mean, whenever you mention Habsburg on Twitter, you're inundated with pictures of people with big jaws and Gavrilo Princip, and people with who themselves are probably fairly inbred, yapping about inbreeding. I mean, the minute a Habsburg raises his head above the mud, he'll get kicked and stepped on. Why? Who would want that? Now, if it were offered, would they accept it? Yeah, I'm sure they would. But it's not going to be offered to them. Everybody has what they want. We have what we want, the best of all possible worlds, the slime buckets that own us now, the voice of the people. And we'll all go along doing what we're supposed to, and it's all wonderful. Vox populi, vox Dei. The voice of the people is the voice of God. And we were shown precisely what that meant during the COVID lockdown. Bark like dogs, little ones, bark. But thank God we don't have an evil monarchy. And thank God we're not ruled by terrible people like the Habsburgs. We're ruled by our kind of people. Slime buckets. I mean, that is, fortunately, it's true at almost. So, I, I wish I could tell you something better, but I would be the last person to suggest to a Habsburg or any other royal that they destroy themselves for the sake of people who don't even mind their babies being murdered and who are incapable of even reproducing a sustainable amount of a sustainable population. People who have tolerated the utter collapse of every kind of standard and principle. I mean, look at what we accept. Why should we have any better than what we've got? It'd be wonderful if one of those royals would draw their swords and lead who exactly? The people who have freed their countries from abortion and euthanasia and gay marriage? Those people? Oh yeah, them.
Well, maybe. So, is there a middle ground at all? So, not necessarily like in favor of a restoration of the monarchy. I remember when we were talking about the Windsors last year. The way you were talking, it seemed like you were saying that they are taught to sort of almost be nothing more than a museum piece,
Pretty
right?
much.
Right? Yeah, something like that, where like
Yeah.
they take nothing upon themselves in terms of helping people or helping their country at all.
Not if it steps in the way of the elected representatives of the people,
Okay.
consecrated by the holy rite of election, wherein the very best always rise to the top, like scum rising to the top of a pot of soup.
Okay. So I think I kind of got my answer there with your emotional reaction, where there kind of is no middle ground because the powers that be are so sensitive to that
Pre
middle ground.
Precisely. They have no desire for any kind of rivalry, and as long as they keep their helots fed and fed, drugged, and sexed up, we're fine.
Okay.
And it's the devil's deal, of course, and we'll all have to pay for it eventually. But at least we're free. Isn't that great? And it was Satan himself who says in Paradise Lost, better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven. And that is the motto of every republic and of every democracy. You see, the funny thing about Paradise Lost is that it was actually, in some ways, a what's the word? I can't think of the word. Not a parody, but a representation, for want of a better word. I can't think of the word I want.
Satire?
Oh, no. It's not amusing. Tolkien hated them, which is why he didn't like Narnia.
Oh, in it starts with an A.
Allegory.
Allegory.
Yes. In a lot of ways, Paradise Lost was an allegory of the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, with Satan as Cromwell, and or Cromwell as Satan, and Charles I as Christ. Milton was a Puritan, after all. And people often wonder, why is Satan a much more compelling figure in Paradise Lost? Well, it's because he's Cromwell. That's why. And Milton liked Cromwell. He didn't like Charles I. Anyway, um, it was Saul Alinsky who said that Satan was the first radical, and it was Dr. Johnson who said that Satan was the first Whig. And I have to agree, although they were diametrically opposed to each other, I would have to agree with both Dr. Johnson and Saul Alinsky. I mean, we do not want to be ruled by decent people. I say we as the majority of folk, of course. We don't want that. We want what we have. And the proof of the pudding was brought home to me when the pro-abort California constitutional amendment passed so well, 65%.
It passed more than the people who voted for Newsom.
That's correct. So you know there was a good 4% who knew that Newsom was a schmuck, but nevertheless wanted to kill babies.
Yeah.
So okay, enjoy it. Eat it. Take it. Love it. Wrap yourself in it. Feel it. Be it. Do it. But if we're ever to deserve rulers like Blessed Karl of Austria, we have to improve ourselves. We have to become the sort of subjects that deserve those sorts of sovereigns. Or at least enough of us have to. There is a sense, in which truly, and I don't say this as an endorsement of democracy, but the reality is that every regime, in a sense, depends upon the tacit consent of the majority. Because if the majority weren't willing to go along with it, they wouldn't be able to manage. That's why the Soviet Union fell. It wasn't because suddenly everybody became a Democrat east of the Iron Curtain. It's because the thing could no longer sustain itself. It couldn't provide the bare minimum. And any regime, if they can provide the bare minimum, will get the grudging support of a majority. But if they can't, that's when they lose it. Otherwise, regime change comes through determined minorities doing what they want in the face of the majority. But anyhow, that's my answer. And as I say, I am in no sense a spokesman for any of the Habsburgs or the Bourbons or the Windsors or any royals whatsoever, which shows you, even in exile or out of power, they're still a lot smarter than they might be.